has become the one thing that power cannot tolerate because it encourages critical thinking. I've been asked to speak about ruling science and traditional knowledge. And ruling science is a very, very interesting phenomenon. Me particularly, since I am a trained scientist. Ruling science has taken on itself the projection of a culturally neutral, universal knowledge system, when in fact it is produced by a very particular group of people with very, very particular values and intentions. In terms of a particular group, what is called science today, its major contours, its major framework, it's been defined very much in the 16th century and early 17th century by people like Francis Bacon. And people like Bacon actually wrote a book called The Masculine Birth of Time, saying that knowledge so far had been effeminate. Holistic knowledge, knowledge that took interactions and connections into account, was effeminate, and now we needed an objective knowledge that would be masculine. New institutions were created, like the Royal Society in England, and its secretary, Henry Oldenburg, in 1664, said that the intention of society was to raise a masculine philosophy whereby the mind of man may be ennobled with the knowledge of solid truths. Very clearly, the idea of creating a masculinist philosophy was very much in the minds of the founding fathers of the ruling science. But the consequences of what they were doing was to create a mechanical philosophy and a reductionist philosophy which had no capacity to understand real systems, because real systems are based on interconnection, real systems are based on relationship, real systems are based on multiple levels of nature and life being organized. And this system had no place for all of that. It was based on the assumption that the world is like a machine and its parts are uniform parts. So you understand one little part, you understand everything. In my mind, reductionism as this mechanical philosophy of separation and uniformity is not an accident. It was the only worldview within which an exploitative capitalism could have grown. Because once you can separate an element from the whole, then you don't have to assess the consequences of its exploitation. If the forests aren't linked to the water, you can cut the forests. If the minerals aren't linked to the water, like a bauxite, then you can mine the bauxite. If you understand the connections, you have to stop, pause, assess, discuss, and then take action. But reductionism gives you license to rape. In my book, Staying Alive, I've cited the levels of violence that this paradigm generates. It generates a violence against women and other cultures. It establishes a very artificial expert-non-expert divide. And the dominant culture decides who will be counted as an expert and whose knowledge will not count. It generates violence against nature, because nature is no more a subject. As an object of knowledge, it is repeatedly violated. Its integrity and its processes are violated. And a fragmented, partial knowledge is used as a basis of exploiting nature's resources, but not for understanding nature. It also perpetrates violence against the beneficiaries of knowledge. leaves us with more disease. 80% diseases are now created in iatrogenic processes. In the case of food, all of the industrial agriculture systems are supposed to be for the benefit of people, producing more food and more nutrition. And instead they have left us with 1 billion people without food and 2 billion people cursed with bad food, with diseases of obesity, diabetes, and other food-related epidemics of our times. But for me, what's deeply troublesome is that the ruling science does violence to knowledge itself. In order to assume the status of being the only legitimate mode of knowledge, which is rationally superior to alternative modes of knowing, reductionist science resorts to the suppression and falsification of facts. And we see this every day in medicine, in genetic engineering. Every day, facts are fabricated to justify falsely the superiority of the dominant system. The narrative said that this was a search for objective knowledge of superior, solid truths. And instead, we have the evaporation of reality itself. And when you have no reality, how on earth can you have truth? So you have, on the one hand, a separation between nature and knowledge, which leads to the disappearance of nature and the very reality you're trying to understand, as well as a separation between the so-called knowledge experts and other knowledge keepers and knowledge generators, citizens, women, peasants, tribals, indigenous cultures. But the epistemic separation goes hand in hand with massive systems of domination and exploitation. So at that level, there's no separation. The separation is in the knowledge. What this has done is it's replaced reality with constructions and abstractions. And those abstractions become more real than reality itself. And let me give you 3 examples of the rule of abstracts. In my view, the most important player on the global economic and political scene is today the corporation. But the corporation is a construct. It's an abstraction. It's given the legal status of being a human person, but it is not a human person. And it's always very interesting to find how abstract constructions become so powerful. In the case of the corporation as a legal person, a citizen who then annihilates real citizens and the rights of real citizens, the reading of the corporation as a person, as a citizen, has been done through the distorted report of a legal case in America and California, where a clerk wrote a legal summary and just put there, instead of the corporation, they put the name citizen, the citizen so-and-so, and from then onwards, we have treated the corporation as if it was a human being, and then given it higher rights than real human beings have. The G, another construct, which today dominates our food systems, dominates the politics of science, how decisions will be made. The G is just an assumption. For those of you who are interested, I would recommend very strongly a book on the history of science called The Molecular Vision of Life. And it's been written by, I think she's a Harvard historian. Her name is Lily Kay. Her name is Lily Kay. Lily Kay worked on the archives of the Rockefeller Foundation. And through that was able to reconstruct how the new disciplines of molecular biology and genetic engineering evolved. And she finds that after the science of the Holocaust was put into shame because of all those concentration camps and the killing of the Jews through scientific experiment, a number of the scientists moved to America and they designed a new paradigm. They called it at that time social psychology. And the paradigm, they said, was to look for the atoms of biological determinism at the level of, and to call these atoms the gene. It's long before DNA, long before Watson and Crick, long before all of that. But 20 years, 30 years before that, they said, let's find the atoms of biological determinism so that no one can say this is a social discrimination. It is in the blueprint at the genetic level. But this is now generating a very false science. And in the face of that false science, lots of political manipulation in order to impose on society the new genetically engineered foods, which science tells us have impacts that are not fully known. We know scientifically that a single gene doesn't have a single expression, it can have multiple expressions, and that traits are not rooted in one gene but a complex of genes. But what is most important, genes are not immutable. Genes are not atoms. Their function, behavior changes according to the environment and the context. So everything about a reductionist genetics goes counter to the way genes actually work in relationship in living systems. The domination of abstractions is also actually being played out very intensely in the climate debate right now. Because on the one hand, we have a chaotic, unpredictable climate. That's experienced by real people everywhere. Most of the discussion, however, is not about the climate as it is, but climate models. And now the discussion is about the hacking of the emails between climate modelers. So you have reality being replaced by models, and the dismantling of models as an argument against the phenomena in reality. It's very interesting. In India, they suddenly, the climate skeptics have floated a new debate that the glaciers aren't melting. And they assume that the only way you can counter it is to be a glaciologist who does 40 years research on one glacier. And we are countering it by just having village communities monitor and tell how much a particular glacier has receded. We're bringing people back into the novel discussion. This separation of reductionism also becomes a social and political separation, where an epistemic divide is created between those who are supposed to know and those who are not supposed to know. And not only is there ignoring of the excluded system, very often there's a criminalizing of that which you want to exclude. The most vivid example of this criminalization is the witch hunts, which were nothing more than the killing of the most knowledgeable women of that period. Ayurveda, which literally means the science of life, is India's ancient system of healing, eating, and it's a very systematic science. The British had made it illegal. Practicing Ayurveda had been made illegal, and it took a bear, an Ayurveda, to organize a new university around Ayurveda, to legalize it again. And about 10 years ago, I did 100 years of that university. But you constantly have to legitimize yourself in the context of the new exclusion. One of the features of the ruling science is to treat science and knowledge as commodity and as property, which is why the whole intellectual property and patent issue is so important. And this is also very often, I know, in university systems, when universities are privatized, departments are told to earn their living through patents. You know, sign up a contract with Monsanto or with Novartis and earn the salaries, earn the costs through intellectual property contracts. How on earth do you get a patent on philosophy? So the model fails for the deeper foundations of knowledge. And this intellectual property issue has serious life and death impacts on real people. Patenting of seed then requires that ordinary seed of farmers is criminalized. It's made illegal. And that's why I started Vandana as a way of defending and celebrating the saving of seed. Monopolies through patents also mean very high costs that small farmers, poor peasants cannot afford. And I have just given to Piero Italian translation of our report called Seeds of Suicide, because 200,000 Indian peasants have committed suicide as a result of indebtedness, most of it driven by seed monopolies. Another consequence of patenting and intellectual property, which is privatizing of knowledge, is the phenomenon that I have named biopiracy. Traditional knowledge is denied the status of knowledge till it is stolen and patented. Then it becomes an invention. So we fought 3 cases of biopiracy. The first was a case of neem, and until this patent was taken, we were always told, oh, it's a superstition that neem can control pests. And the US government and WRS take a patent, and now it's supposed to become science. Superstition in the hands of people, science in the hands of the public. The other case was neem. The second case was basmati, this aromatic rice that's very famous from my valley. And a company in Texas took a patent on it and claimed to have invented the plant, the seed, the aroma, even the methods of cooking rice. It was their invention. Nobody knew how to cook rice till Rice Tech in Texas took that patent. And there's a very ancient wheat variety in India that has very low gluten content. And because so many people are getting gluten allergies, Monsanto had patented this wheat. And I thought they'd have world monopoly on a low gluten wheat, but we fought that case. And each of these 3 cases we have won, which means we've been able to establish the integrity of traditional knowledge. And we've been able to establish that our societies have had the knowledge, and we haven't allowed the pirating of this knowledge through structures of power. We cannot afford either the disappearance or the subjugation of traditional knowledge, because that's what we have to build on in these periods of multiple crises and a dead end for the dominant knowledge system. In agriculture, every step of advance in industrial agriculture is generating more ecological crisis and more health crisis. It's not able to address foundational problems. The alternatives that are ecological are rooted in things like organic farming. But if you look at where does organic farming come from, a person called Sir Albert Howard was sent by the British in 1905 to India as the imperial agriculturist. In those days, they didn't have the word agriculturist. They called them economic botanists, to improve Indian agriculture, which meant to introduce chemicals into Indian farming. And as he says here, I found no pests, found no soils infertile, threw away his spray guns and pesticides, and decided to turn, as he says in his book, The Agricultural Testament, I decided to make the peasant and the pest my teachers. The book, The Agricultural Testament, is how organic farming has spread worldwide, but it is the traditional knowledge of the peasantry. And the recently issued report of the United Nations, called the International Assessment of Agriculture, Science and Technology Development, based on 4 years of research by 400 scientists who went through all the published literature, they are having to admit that neither the Green Revolution nor genetic engineering is able to offer solutions. The only solutions for the problems in food and agriculture are coming from traditional knowledge and small farmers of the world. But of course, this is being suppressed. At the recent summits in Rome on food, there was such politics around not tabling their own report because it showed that the Monsantos have no role in the future of food. The future of humanity and the future of human democracy, I deeply believe, rests on knowledge democracy. To count different traditions of knowledge as equal and relevant, and to give them equal respect, and to let them have the freedom to evolve and express their full potential. And linked to knowledge democracy is the new concept we have evolved in our manifesto. Piero was a member of the expert group that drafted it, and I think Caroline Lockhart, who's the coordinator of the commission, has brought some copies, and Maria Grazia, who is the head of our agency that runs the International Commission on the Future of Food, is also here with us, and I'd like to thank both of them for their tremendous work and support. The idea of knowledge sovereignty, just as a free society is based on free individuals who are sovereign, a free society of knowledge is based on knowledge sovereignty, the recognition of the sovereign rights of every person as a knowing subject. But since each of us is a knowing subject, this sovereign right is based on a sovereign duty. And that duty is the duty to share knowledge, the duty to give knowledge, the duty to spread knowledge. On the one hand, this is the recognition that knowledge is a commons. And on the other hand, it's a recognition that knowledge privatization goes against the very basis of the generation and dissemination of knowledge. Just as the privatization of seed kills the future potential of evolution of biological diversity, the privatization of knowledge and privatization of knowledge institutions kills the future potential of the evolution of the knowledge we need to adapt to constantly changing times. It is like the farmers are being pushed to suicide. Society itself is being pushed to suicide if knowledge is privatized and is seen to have only a function to make profits for some people rather than serve all of society to equip future generations to be active, democratic citizens, shaping the society they want. Thank you.